Imagine meeting the very first human who ever told a lie. Not a politician, not a used car salesman, not even your little cousin who insists he didn't eat the last cookie while chocolate is still covering his face. No, the very first liar lived tens of thousands of years ago. And here's the strange part. That lie may have helped our species survive. Because for most of human history, telling the truth wasn't always the safest option. Sometimes, the smartest thing your brain could do was convince somebody else of something that wasn't true. Which raises a fascinating question. If evolution rewards honesty, why are humans so unbelievably good at lying? To answer that, we have to travel back to a world where trust was rare, food was scarce, and every conversation could change whether you lived or died. Picture yourself standing beside a campfire almost 50,000 years ago. Around you sits a small group of hunter-gatherers, perhaps 30 people, maybe 40. You know every face, every voice, every habit. There are no strangers here, only family, friends, rivals, and people who remember every mistake you've ever made. Life is brutally simple. If someone finds food, everyone notices. If someone refuses to help, everyone remembers. If someone acts selfishly, their reputation spreads faster than wildfire. In a world this small, honesty seems like the obvious strategy. After all, if everyone knows everyone else, lying should be impossible, right? Strangely, the opposite happened. Because humans didn't evolve inside perfect societies. We evolved inside complicated social games. Imagine that yesterday you secretly discovered a tree full of ripe fruit, enough to feed several people. If everyone rushes there tomorrow, the fruit disappears immediately. But if only you know, your own family eats first. Suddenly, keeping information private becomes valuable. Now imagine someone asks, "Did you find anything today?" For the first time in history, telling the complete truth might actually reduce your own chances of survival. And that tiny decision changes everything. Because the moment information becomes valuable, information can also be manipulated. And that's where our story really begins. Most animals can hide. Some animals can camouflage. A few animals even pretend to be dead. But humans discovered something far stranger. We learned to manipulate, not what others see, but what others believe. That difference changed history. A tiger can fool your eyes. A stick insect can fool your vision. But only humans can quietly place an idea inside another person's mind. Think about that for a second. A lie is invisible. It has no smell, no shape, no sound of its own. It exists entirely inside another brain, which means lying requires something astonishing. Before you can fool someone else, you must first imagine what they are thinking. You need to understand that another person has thoughts different from your own. Psychologists call this theory of mind. Without it, lying would be impossible. Ironically, the ability that allows us to cooperate also allows us to deceive. Now here's where things become even stranger. Imagine two prehistoric hunters returning from a long day. Neither one found anything. Both are exhausted. Both are hungry. Back at camp, someone asks the obvious question. "So, how did the hunt go?" One hunter shrugs. "Nothing today." The other smiles. "I almost caught one." Technically, that might even be true. Maybe he really did almost catch one. But notice what just happened. The second hunter didn't invent a completely false story. He simply adjusted reality, just enough, to protect his reputation. Humans are surprisingly good at doing exactly that. We rarely tell outrageous lies. Most of our everyday deception lives in the gray area between truth and fiction. "I was just about to leave. I didn't see your message. I'm fine." None of those sentences necessarily describe reality perfectly. Instead, they manage how another person sees us. And that ability turns out to be incredibly useful. Because evolution doesn't reward being perfectly honest. Evolution rewards solving problems. Sometimes honesty solves the problem. Sometimes diplomacy solves the problem. Sometimes silence solves the problem. And sometimes a carefully chosen lie solves the problem. Of course, that creates an entirely new challenge. Because if lying becomes useful, how do you stop everyone from lying all the time? The answer is surprisingly elegant. As soon as humans became good liars, other humans began evolving into excellent lie detectors. Suddenly, every conversation became a silent competition. One brain tried to convince The other brain tried to verify. Imagine sitting around another prehistoric campfire. Someone claims they saw a herd of giant deer over the next hill. Everyone listens. But nobody simply accepts the story. People begin asking questions. How many? Which direction? What time? Were there footprints? Without realizing it, they are testing the storyteller. Thousands of generations later, you still do exactly the same thing. When someone tells an unbelievable story, your brain automatically starts searching for tiny inconsistencies. Their voice, their timing, their facial expressions, their confidence. Even though movies often suggest humans are excellent lie detectors, science tells a different story. In reality, most people are surprisingly bad at spotting lies, but we are extremely good at something else. We constantly collect little pieces of evidence. One clue means almost nothing. 10 clues together can completely change our opinion. Your brain behaves less like a police officer and more like a detective slowly building a case. And that invisible game has been running inside human conversations for tens of thousands of years. Now let's ask a much more uncomfortable question. If lying is so useful, why don't we lie constantly? Because every lie has a cost. Imagine borrowing food from your neighbor. You promise to repay them after tomorrow's hunt, but you never do. Perhaps you get away with it once, maybe twice, but eventually, people notice trust begins disappearing. And once trust disappears, cooperation disappears with it. No one shares food. No one helps raise children. No one warns you about danger. In a small prehistoric tribe, losing your reputation could be almost as dangerous as losing your food. That's why humans evolved something fascinating. We don't simply care whether people lie. We care who lies. We remember, we compare stories, we warn others. In other words, our ancestors didn't just evolve the ability to deceive. They also evolved the ability to build reputations. Long before social media, human society already had reviews. They just happened to be spoken around a campfire instead of written online. And perhaps that's the funniest part of all. Your ancestors weren't cancelled on the internet. They were quietly ignored by everyone who mattered. Which, back then, was far worse. But here's the twist that surprised scientists. Lying didn't evolve because humans became evil. It evolved because humans became intelligent enough to imagine another person's mind. Think about what happens every time you tell even the smallest lie. Before you speak, your brain performs an astonishing amount of work. It predicts what the other person already knows. It estimates what they are likely to believe. It imagines how they might react. It quickly searches for a believable story. Then, while you're telling that story, your brain continues monitoring the listener's face. Are they suspicious? Do they believe you? Should you add more details? Should you stop talking? In other words, lying is not the opposite of intelligence. It is actually one of intelligence's most complicated side effects. That doesn't make lying good. It simply explains why humans became capable of it. Evolution wasn't trying to create honest people, nor was it trying to create dishonest people. Evolution was solving a different problem. How do you survive inside the most socially complicated species that has ever existed? Sometimes cooperation was the answer. Sometimes competition. Sometimes complete honesty. Sometimes careful deception. The remarkable part is that your brain became capable of all four. And perhaps that's why humans became so different from every other animal on Earth. Not because we are stronger, not because we are faster, but because we learned to live inside invisible worlds, made entirely of ideas, trust, reputation, promises, secrets, and yes, lies. So, why did humans learn to lie? The answer isn't simply because lying helped people steal more food or escape punishment. Those things certainly happened, but they were only symptoms. The deeper answer is far more fascinating. Humans learned to lie because we first learned to understand each other. The very ability that lets you comfort a frightened child, tell a funny joke, write a novel, invent a religion, or explain a scientific theory is built upon the same extraordinary ability to imagine another person's thoughts. Without that ability, there would be no lies, but there would also be no stories, no teaching, no empathy, no civilization. In a strange way, every lie reminds us of something extraordinary. Hidden beneath it is one of the greatest evolutionary inventions our species has ever developed. The ability to step inside another human mind. So the next time someone tells you, "I'm 5 minutes away," when they're still standing in the shower, try not to think only about the lie. Think about the incredible evolutionary journey that made such a ridiculous sentence possible in the first place. Because beneath every tiny everyday deception, there is a brain, still running software that began updating tens of thousands of years ago, around a prehistoric campfire. And perhaps the most fascinating part of all is that our next question about humanity is probably already waiting. If you enjoyed exploring one more strange piece of human evolution, there's another fascinating question waiting just around the corner. Until next time, keep asking why, because every answer is just the beginning of another sketch.